because I'm using my
Yeah,
phone.
yeah, we're both
Alrighty.
recording.
Yeah, I'm recording too.
Okay, take it away.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight's CDPM lecture. My name is Stefan Harben. I'm a PA and owner of Iron Direct Primary Care. And today's special lecture is on chronic fatigue, assessment and treatment through diet and mitochondrial optimization, because chronic fatigue is a huge subject. So I'm going to focus it mostly on the diet and mitochondrial optimization. Because when I see a chronically fatigued patient, there's a lot of things I think about. But the basics that we're going to go on about today is the nutrition, which we're going to learn has a lot to do with the mitochondria and NAD. The post-COVID mitochondrial fatigue in particular is actually increasingly common. And then all the other ones, which I can give you guys more lectures on in the future. This includes low thyroid, low testosterone male, which we talked about last week. Anemic young females, very common. Postmenopausal female, very fatigued. Lyme fatigue, mold mycotoxins fatigue, that POTS dysautonomia fatigue, and the cancer fatigues, and then the whole circadian rhythm disruption type of fatigue, and the sleep disturbance fatigue. A lot of different types of fatigues. They come in all different flavors. Let's talk about my favorite subject, which is muscle, and muscle as an energy storage unit or energy storage organ. The muscle, it stores glucose in the muscle in the form of glycogen, and this is an energy reservoir that we evolved to utilize in times of high explosive, uh, um, uh, catching a prey or running. Glycolysis would release the glucose and would fuel our energy system. So the muscle, we have to teach all our patients, is an energy reserve, and we can train our muscle to properly utilize energy and then release energy appropriately if it's well conditioned and regularly trained. But beyond glycogen, you can also use protein as an energy source as well. Amino acids in muscles can be mobilized during periods of starvation or stress through a process called proteolysis. Not something we really want, but it can be also used. So what happens when you have loss of muscle with age? It's called sarcopenia, and it's very common. You see it everywhere. You have reduced glycogen storage capacity, which means you don't store glucose appropriately. You have impaired glucose metabolism, leading to the insulin resistance and inability to use glucose efficiently. Loss of protein reserves. Decreased mitochondrial function. The mitochondria, they produce ADP. It's the body's energy currency. And then, of course, you have reduced physical capacity. Your muscles aren't as strong. And then systemic effects with loss of muscle with time. You have reduced myokine signaling, which normally helps combat inflammation. We know the patients with lack of muscle, they have more cytokine response, more cytokine storm. So those patients with infections, the chronic Lyme, the mold, the mycotoxins, the EBV, if they have less muscle, they have more of an inflammatory reaction. We learned this in COVID, how the cytokine storm activates when you have a more atrophied patient. Let's look at the diet, and we're going to first look at a critical analysis of vegan nutrition studies. This is because we have a lot of mainstream and even alternative medicine that are promoting vegan diets. And even the cardiology associations, they're saying that we all should be on the vegan diets. But we're going to learn here how this can contribute potentially to cardiometabolic risk and inflammation due to sarcopenia, lack of muscle. And we're going to talk about some of these studies that proponents of vegan diets have perpetuated throughout mainstream and functional medicine, including the EPIC, the Nurses' Health Study, and the EAT-Lancet. And we're going to review some of these studies. So vegans can get all their nutrition from plants. It's called textbook reductionism. Animal meats are not nutritionally identical to plant proteins. So the vegan proponents will say you can get all your nutrients from plant-based diets. This is not true. You're going to lack taurine, carnosine, L-arginine, carnitine, creatine. There's no creatine in plant-based meats. Creatine is essential for the ATP phosphocreatine system. It's the basic energy system in the body that when you need to do a sprint, when you need to run from the tiger, your body utilizes that creatine ATP phosphokinase system. And creatine is only found in meats. And then the other essential source of energy in the body is NAD. And this is, again, found only in meats in the precursor forms, nicotinamide, which we're going to talk about extensively later. So again, here's the creatine. Where does this come from? And this is what I learned in my exercise physiology courses in college. The energy system. So the instant energy when you need to sprint, that's stored ATP, creatine, and phosphate. And then anaerobic metabolism happens after about between when you burn through that creatine system, which is about 10 to 30 seconds or 90 seconds. Then anaerobic metabolism kicks in. That's where you release glycogen, or you release glucose from the storage form of glycogen in the muscle. And then longer term energy reservoir, this is where you start fatty oxidation, where you start burning fat for fuel. And this happens much further on. For some trained athletes, they can get quicker into fat utilization for energy. And then much more into training, like marathons, you start breaking down protein for energy. As an athlete, you really don't want to get to that stage, but of course, your muscle can always be used as an energy form to burn amino acids for energy. Oh, we skipped a page here. And you can get creatine from beef, pork, chicken, fish, organ meats, of course. There actually is no plant-based sources of creatine. So a vegan would need to supplement with creatine to have a storage form in that energy molecule. We evolved to eat meats. The human stomach has a pH of 1.5. It's not far off from the bald eagle, which has a pH of 1.3 in the stomach. More herbivorous creatures like deers, they'll have a acidity of the stomach of 5.5. The human on omeprazole and the PPIs, their stomach acidity will be more akin to the hippo or the elephant. Omeprazole has been found to increase the pH in humans to 4.02. So the human is meant to digest meats. That's why we have a pH of 1.5, which is somewhere in between that of the bald eagle and the gray falcon. So veganism is not necessarily compatible with human evolution. So consider the paper, one of my favorite is Paleolithic Nutrition, where predators, as discussed previously, our stomach acidity is that of the birds of prey. And like cats, we have limited capacity to synthesize the amino acid taurine from its precursor amino acids. And vegetarian diets are known to result in lower blood concentrations of taurine. So this implies that we need to synthesize taurine and we need to eat the meats that have this. We evolved a dependency towards animal foods. Micronutrients B12 is found only in animal foods. Similarly, the richest source of iron, iodine, folic acid, and vitamin A are found in animal foods, and vitamin A in particular in liver organs. Animal meats have higher quantity of vitamins compared to fruits and veggies. Folic acid, although it's in the green leafy vegetables, it's actually very high in beef liver. Taurine's role in energy metabolism. Again, if we remember earlier, cats, they get very sick and die if they don't get taurine into the diet. And we're just like cats in that we cannot synthesize taurine. So what do you need taurine for? Mitochondrial function, antioxidant defense, muscle performance, nervous system regulation. Vegans often have lower BMI. And the vegan cardiologists, they'll say, well, this is a good thing, right? But if you just focus on BMI, you're completely missing the mark. So in my practice, we have the muscle-centric medicine approach. So all my patients have to understand that muscle is your great lever against all diseases. And all diseases can be essentially reversed with better muscle composition. So BMI is a crude measurement. In this practice, we don't focus on that. I prefer my patients to get a DEXA body composition scan or an abdominal MRI to look at the quantity and quality of the muscle compared to fat. Vegans, on the other hand, they will have a lower BMI, but this is a crude assessment. We need to look at their body composition more important. Parallels of vegan diet with sarcopenia. If you look at DEXA scans and MRIs of vegan patients, oftentimes they will have a preponderance of visceral fat on their organs and a lack of bone mineral density and decrease in lean body mass. Now, there's better vegan diets and there's cheap vegan diet meals. But it's not far off from the standard American diet when I encounter many vegans. Uh, it's effective restrictive vegan diet on muscle mass, oxidative status, and myocyte differentiation. A significant decrease in muscle mass index and lean body mass in vegan compared to vegetarian and omnivore groups, and higher serum homocysteine levels in vegetarians and vegans compared to omnivores. Now, that higher homocysteine level may be related to a lack of folate or methylfolate, where you're going to get that more from animal source foods compared to plant-based foods. This is a doctor that I've argued with some on social media extensively. Is a website dedicated to promoting plant-based diets. Whenever I encounter some of the, and we're going to review some of these studies that he talks about here, and I think that they miss the mark consistently on looking at the muscle quality and quantity versus the fatty accumulation on the abdomen. Focusing just on BMI as a predictor of cardiovascular disease completely misses the mark. Veganism, by definition, is high carb, and this diet might be contraindicated in about 88% of the population because most are insulin resistant and many are on the road towards diabetes. And if they're on a high carbohydrate diet, this is probably not the best thing for them. There's a lot of good studies we now have for low carbohydrate diet interventions to reduce triglycerides and improve HDL. The other problem I have with a lot of the vegan nutrition studies is that they're inherently biased. Many are funded by the Seventh-day Adventists, and when you really look at who's doing these studies, it's oftentimes self-congratulatory. This is Gary Fetka. He's an Australian medical doctor who prescribed low carbohydrate diets to his diet. And he had his medical license revoked, and he was in legal battles for years in Australia, fighting the Australian medical authorities. And when they brought him to court, the people that they had testify against him were Seventh-day Adventist professors. And Seventh-day Adventists, if you may know, it's a religious sect that believes that plant-based diets improves the purity of their spirituality. Let's look at some of these studies that I often get asked about. Animal protein intake is associated with insulin resistance in the Adventist health study, calibration studies, cross-section analysis. So I saw this one by a vegan cardiologist who showed that animal protein causes insulin resistance. It was on Seventh-day Adventists, which was kind of odd, and it only examined 548 participants truly. And what they did, it was a recall study. So they called the patients up and they asked them to remember what they had eaten for the past 6 months. I mean, I can't remember what I had the past week. This is another one I get a lot. It's the EPIC study. Dietary intake and total animal and veggie protein intake, the risk of type 2 diabetes in the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, EPIC Netherlands studies. Their results showed that the patient filled out these health questionnaires were essentially following a food pyramid meal plan. The questionnaire did not discriminate between the quality of the meat protein. So, was the meal in a fried chicken bun, or was it a grass-finished beef, regeneratively raised? And really, they were eating a lot of bread. 43% of the diet was bread. Fruit, vegetables was 14%. So kind of like a food pyramid style diet, not truly an animal-based diet, which we're going to talk about later. The nurses' health study. Oh, I get quoted by this one a lot. The longest running study on the health of nurses. And this study, it concluded that the researchers suggested limiting intake of refined sugars, we can agree, grains, food sodas, and restricting processed foods, and red and organ meats. And I'm thinking for a moment, okay, what kind of nurse do I know that eats beef liver regularly? I don't know of one. This is what I find in break rooms in commercial medical practices. You can see cakes, you can see M&Ms. This is just a couple of pictures of what my wife sends me when she works at these medical urgent cares. Cakes, Hawaiian Kings doughs. And this is what they regularly fill the nurses' break room with. This is what nurses are eating. So I don't know if the nurses' health study is useful at all. It's the problem I have with these recall studies. And people will lie. Like, I ate healthy this week. Another problem I get quoted, the blue zone dwellers, super centenarians, and the oldest are concentrated regions with no birth certificates and short lifespans. So the state-specific introduction of birth certificates is associated with a 69 to 82% fall in the number of super centenarian records. So what this means is that poor record keeping and perhaps uh, pension fraud is more associated with long lifespans than actually the location that they're living in. So if you know anything about southern Italy, it's known as lesser developed than northern Italy, and there's less industry, there's less money, and so typically poor. So poorer areas with worse record keeping is associated with longer lifespans. So this one is veganism safe for children? The Veggie diet study. I was arguing with a vegan anesthesiologist on Instagram once, and I told him that he probably shouldn't make his children be vegan all their life. He said, "Oh, it's perfectly safe. It's been studied." Well, the study that he actually showed me was the Veggie diet study, and it showed that more vegetarian and vegan than omnivorous children were classified as stunted and wasted. And when I pointed this out to him, he blocked me on Instagram. High omega-6 to low omega-3 and mitochondrial health. We have to understand this ratio here. So mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cells producing ATP through oxidative phosphorylation. Their membranes, rich in lipids, are sensitive to the fatty acid composition. A high omega-6 and lower omega-3 ratio disrupts mitochondrial function in several ways: altered membrane fluidity, increased oxidative stress, and impaired mitochondrial biogenesis. So what happens when you eat high omega-6, and where do you get high omega-6s? Well, nuts, and don't get me wrong, I like nuts. Nuts are good, but excessive nut consumption, eating nut oils. I get some patients that sometimes think that eating 1/3 of their calories with peanut oil is healthy every day. And not necessarily super healthy to consume that much. And if you think about it, if you eat a little couple nuts, you're quite full. But you could probably put a bunch of peanut butter in a smoothie and you could drink that. So you're getting excessive calories, and you're drinking typically a highly oxidized oil. Because if you look at almond butter, how do they extract it? Well, they heat it. So you're oxidizing a polyunsaturated fat, high omega-6. So you're oxidizing a high omega-6 oil. And then no wonder when you look at the blood test, they have super high omega-6 and low omega-3 and have fatigue and mitochondrial problems and oxidative stress. The vegan diets, unfortunately, will contain high omega-6 sources and low omega-3 unless they add the fish into the diet as well, like the vegetarian might do. What happens? May reduce nitric oxide generation, increase production of vasoconstriction, eicosanoids, linked to chronic fatigue, reduced ATP production. If the mitochondria are less efficient or damaged, cells, especially energy-hungry ones like muscle and brain cells, struggle to meet demand. So I will routinely encounter a chronically fatigued vegan. Brain fog, muscle weakness, cachexia, systemic inflammation. Omega-6 heavy diets drive chronic low-grade inflammation via pro-inflammatory eicosanoids. Inflammation taxes the body's energy reserves, diverting resources to immune activation rather than the daily function. If a patient is chronically inflamed, the body chronically releases cortisol to try to put out the inflammation in the gut, in the joints, or wherever. The patient will eventually get low cortisol, and low cortisol is a status of chronic fatigue as well.
Vitamin B12 is also the problem with fatigue for the vegans, right?
Correct. They will lack B12. It's very difficult to obtain B12 in a vegan diet. The EAT-Lancet Commission is a flawed approach. Really, this diet was just this study was kind of difficult to understand, but it's sloppy. Really, if you really look into this EAT-Lancet, it's the epidemiology of these diet studies are oftentimes just mountains of poor quality research. It is not replicable either. Let's move on to the ancestral diet and teach you guys the benefits of eating like this. This is an average house call inventory. When I used to do house calls for patients, this is what I would see: high fructose corn syrup, mayonnaise, which was full of soybean oil, or really just buckets of canola or soybean oil that they were using to cook with because they'd listened to the vegan cardiologist who said you got to reduce saturated fat. And so what ends up happening, their cabinets are full of these condiments. They don't have any room left in their fridge because it's full of high fructose corn syrup condiments and seed oils everywhere. And so
Is this
I would
one of the
often,
kitchen that you busted?
yeah, this is one of the kitchens that I busted. Yeah.
You know, you need to come up with a kind of show, TV show, busting kitchen or something with a good title.
Yeah, yeah, like the 600-pound life. I have the reality show. They follow me around and I do this. That'd be funny. People would watch that on TLC, I'm sure.
Really? So you already have it?
No, I mean, if you know TLC, send them my way. I'd love to do this.
Well, I think we can come up with a very nice TV show with this.
Yeah, it would be funny. One time I took 7 bags of junk out of the house. The kids
Well,
were drinking
you
it
took
out
it
with
from
me.
us, man. Remember
What was
you
that?
busted Dr. Joseph's kitchen?
Oh yeah, I busted Dr. Juice's kitchen. I remember that. And it was just his kitchen, his fridge, it only had peptides in there and some condiments. I said, "Where's the food?"
Yeah. Do you remember what he said? It's
Well,
not me. It's not me. It's Dr.
then,
Hassa.
yes, it was Dr.
He was
Halas's
scared
food.
from you, man.
He
It
blamed it
was
on
your
Dr.
food that you
Halassa.
bought. It wasn't
It,
my
it usually
mayonnaise.
doesn't look like this. Okay. Polyunsaturated. Okay, yes, this is interesting. The increase in polyunsaturated oil consumption over time has increased since 1929 is when it started. It really shot up with soybean oil. That's the red line there. It shot up extraordinarily high to 1999. I think it's just increased since then. Canola oil has shot up as well. And obesity has also shot up. I think there's some correlation here. Our mainstream friends will say, no, correlation, not causation. Well, let's see what the farmer has to say. This is a fat chicken, right? Everyone agrees here. Fat chicken. The farmers know that if you feed a chicken soybean oil, they improve their weight gain. So you can feed corn and soybean to the broiler, and they rapidly increase their weight compared to the non-soybean oil fed chicken. So essentially what we're seeing when you go to Walmart, when you see the patients in the clinic, their obesity is so high. It's calories. They're probably overeating calories, but then the quality of the calories that they're eating matters as well, which we're going to talk about here in a bit. Again, improving the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is super important. And look at the ratios here. And the vegan cardiologists, they'll argue with me. They'll say canola oil has omega-3 in there. Okay, can we go to canola oil here on the list? Where is it? Okay, how about corn oil, for example? Corn oil, it has omega-3. Yes, it has 1,161 milligrams of omega-3, but it has 53,500 milligrams of omega-6. Where's another really common one that they like to here we go. Peanut oil. This is commonly cooked in Asian cooking. When you go to the Asian restaurants, they always cook in the peanut oil. And I actually went to a Thai restaurant and I had the Thai cooks. They were arguing me that the peanut oil was healthier than the coconut oil that I wanted them to use. So the peanut oil, it has 0 milligrams of omega-3 and it has 31,711 milligrams of omega-6. So you can see how easy it is to get an improper omega-6 to omega-3 ratio. It happens very fast. It doesn't take much. Sesame oil, another really good one that's used in Asian foods so much. The sesame oil has 300 milligrams of omega-3 to 41,304 milligrams of omega-6 in a serving. This is insane. You can't beat this by just maybe supplementing with some fish oil. It's a drop in the bucket compared to if you're consuming these high omega-6 oils, especially if you're drinking them or you're cooking them, which you're oxidizing them when you're cooking these oils too. So again, the calorie in, calorie out is a little bit overly simplistic. I'd like to teach my patients to focus on the nutrient density per calorie because this is going to, one, improve their satiety so they're not as hungry, and it will improve the amount of nutrients they're consuming per calorie, which will improve their chronic fatigue. So this is beef liver, and you can get this at grocery store in the frozen section. You can get grass-fed beef liver. And it's super nutrient dense. It's so filling to eat a little bit of beef liver. And it's very cheap too. It's like $6 for a frozen bag. On the right here, you can see what about 197 grams of protein looks like. And that's 2 grams per kilogram of body weight for me. This is when I was really training and really dialed into my diet. It's actually hard to eat this much protein. You get so full on this, you can take a couple bites and you're full. Liver there on the left is about 23 grams of protein. Sirloin steak, 127 grams. 4 eggs. Each egg is about 6 grams of protein. So 4 eggs, about 25 grams of protein. The smoked salmon, about 12 grams. And a bagel is 10 grams of carbohydrate, or 10 grams of protein. But again, 10 grams of protein in a bagel is a lower quality protein than 10 grams of egg, because you extract much more nutrient and amino acids from the egg compared to the wheat, which is a lower quality protein.
Have you tried chickpea bread? And what do you think the calorie chickpea bread?
I've never tried chickpea bread.
You
No.
can make bread from chickpea. You know that? The question is that, do you think it has, what kind of calorie it has?
Well, again, it doesn't matter so much the calorie. You have to think about the nutrient quality, the B vitamins, the amino acids, the creatine, the B12, the NAD stores. That's what we're talking about and focusing on here, not just the calorie. Dietary carbohydrate restriction improves metabolic syndrome independent of weight loss. This is one of my favorite studies here, where they did a really good study where they controlled the diets of these people. And they found that the low carbohydrate diet, it increased the LDL size and decreases the small, dense LDL particles, independent of LDL-C concentration. So focus again on the LDL-C is not so important. They found a protective LDL pattern A in the low carbohydrate group and a pathogenic pattern B in the high carbohydrate group. And you can look at this if you do NMR lipoprotein panels. You can see the pattern changes in patients when they really clean up the diet. This one's really important if any nephrologists or cardiologists are in the chat here. High protein versus standard protein diets in overweight and obese patients with heart failure and diabetes mellitus. So typically, the heart failure patient will be say, you need to restrict the protein because it's not good for your kidneys and your heart. Oh, well, it doesn't turn this out to be true at all. The patients with a higher protein diet, which is actually, in my opinion, low protein, they compared a standard protein diet, which is 15%, and a higher protein diet, which is 30% protein. In my opinion, is still very low protein. And they found that they improved their weight with their waist circumference. I would say they said it's equally effective, but I think that's still an improvement, even though it's not significant. The high protein diets decreased to a greater extent glycosylated hemoglobin A1C levels, 0.7% versus 0.1%, cholesterol and triglyceride values when compared to the standard protein diet. The high protein diet also significantly improved both systolic and diastolic blood pressure than the standard protein diet. So both energy restricted diets, so calorie controlled, they reduced the weight and the visceral fat. However, the high protein diet resulted in a greater reduction of cardiometabolic risk relative to the standard protein diet. So again, calories controlled, different diet composition, better outcome. So how to reverse sarcopenia, which is so common. This is fatty infiltration of the muscle, more fat accumulation, and the muscle wasting. We all have to fight this as we age because the muscle is just a downward slope of the line after about age 25. The hormones decrease, exercise decrease, the strength training decrease, the diet often gets less quality, and then the fatty infiltrates happen and the muscle is wasted. So you need to eat more meat. You shouldn't fill up on the carbohydrates. How many patients, you see a geriatric patient and you ask them about their diet, you need to ask them about their diet. They're oftentimes subsisting off a piece of toast. They eat a toast and they'll put a little jelly on it. And this is their breakfast. And they probably won't eat anything maybe till later in the day, and they do one of those Entivia shakes, which is full of crap. It's just full of processed seed oils. So the elderly patient is the most at risk for cachexia, is subsisting off a piece of toast and jelly and a seed oil-filled shake at the day. It's very low nutrient quality. You need to progressively overload the muscle. Resistance training, we've talked about that here. And then the patients they will come to me and they say, I exercise. Like, what kind of exercise do you do? Well, I walk at work, or I walk the dog. This is not exercise. This is what you should be doing normally. Exercise is something that gets your heart rate up, that grows the muscle, that progressively overloads, that gets you better and stronger every day. Walking is not exercise. It's just something that gets you to and from a place. So can the vegan diet reverse sarcopenia? No, the vegan diet probably induces it. The vegan diet causes significant decrease in muscle mass index, lean body mass in the vegan compared to vegetarian and omnivore groups. We talked about this. Aging muscle causes immune dysfunction, greater cytokine storm release, inflammatory secretomes, pro-inflammatory molecules, impaired myokine signaling and muscle homeostasis, and altered body composition. So the skeletal muscle is an immune organ and immune regulatory. And we need to preserve this through higher protein diet and training. This is another one, but isn't eating lots of animal protein bad for your kidneys? I get this one a lot too. No, and only in CKD, like very advanced CKD too. This is what my diet consists of. Primarily it's small berries, lots of protein. This is a turkey leg there, a lot of beef, chicken, bacon. I don't use so much bacon now, just because it makes a mess. It splashes everywhere. Rice. I will do sweet potato, squash, and my wife does make very good sourdough bread. But I try to prioritize protein. Whenever I sit down for a meal, I'm trying to protein leverage. Protein leveraging means you eat more protein than you do other things, which is sugars, sweets, carbohydrates, you name it. This is more of what my diet looks like. You can see a co-op order. There's squash, carrots, milks, cheeses, cream cheese, steaks. These are soups that you can make. There's a beef kidney there. That's that thing on the top left. Those are bones that you can put in the stew. You just put that in the stew, and those are sausages there for spice, and this is stew meat. You put it in the slow cooker, and you cook it overnight at a low temperature. You add the carrots in there. You add the potatoes. It's so easy. Like, anybody can do this. It takes no brain power. You just hit the start button, 8 hours, and you have food for the entire week. This is how I lived in PA school. PA school, you got to be in class 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day. You get home, you got to study, you got to try to work out in between. I would meal prep on Sunday, big stew, and I had food for the whole week. I go to class, and my classmates, they'd laugh, and they go, oh, what's on the menu today, Stefan? And I'm like, oh, don't tell me, it's soup again. And I eat soup every day. Meanwhile, they're going to Subway shop. And they Subway's healthy, right, Stefan? I'm like, no, Subway's not healthy. What are you talking about? It's like mostly carbohydrate with a little bit of a deli meat. I don't know why people think Subway is healthy. It's not. You need to eat nutrient-dense, high protein. And why? We have to get to the NAD therapy to treat fatigue and aging. So this goes to our mitochondrial part of this lecture. So fatigue is the bane of existence for most primary care providers, not for us at Iron DPC, because we have so many tools in our toolkit to treat fatigue. But I remember talking to some of my colleagues in primary care, and they say when they see fatigue as the chief complaint on the patient paperwork, they sigh like, oh, no, not this again, because conventional medicine doesn't have a treatment for fatigue, unless it's obvious anemia or obvious macrocytic anemia, which is a slam dunk diagnosis, B12 deficiency. It needs to be extraordinarily obvious to treat fatigue in the conventional medicine. But as you see here, it's diet, it's mitochondrial optimization, and then it's many other things. We have a lot of tools. So let's talk about one of the biggest ones, NAD, which was discovered a long time ago, about 100 years ago. NAD, nicotinamide adenine nucleotide, has emerged as a key regulator of cellular processes that control the body's response to stress. NAD boosters, small molecules that raise NAD levels, are now considered to be highly promising for the treatment of multiple diseases and the potential extension of human lifespan. Now, let's talk about where NAD comes from. Here's a little bit of a testimonial on NAD injection. We'll get more into those therapeutics a little bit later. But it can be very helpful for patients that are very severely NAD depleted. They can feel like they come back, especially if they're chronically ill or acutely ill. I learned about this first in the COVID pandemic when I was trying to figure out how to treat these patients. I learned that they were doing IV NAD infusions in Russia for acute COVID in the ICU, and these patients were having good outcomes with NAD. And the reason behind that might be, as we alluded to earlier, NAD depletion from the infection, but chronically low NAD levels that predispose the person to more severe reaction to an illness. So here are some of the forms of NAD. And in the top right corner, I want to focus your attention on red meat. NAD consumer evolution. So meat and vitamin B3 nicotinamide intake was high during hunter-gatherer times. Intake then fell and variances increased during and after the Neolithic agricultural revolution. That's where they started making more grains. Health, height, and IQ deteriorated. Low dietary doses are buffered by welcoming gut symbionts and tuberculosis that can supply nicotinamide. And that's a wild theory. We're going to get a little bit more into that later. But this co-evolved homeostatic metagenomic strategy risks dysbiosis and impaired resistance to pathogens. Vitamin B3 deficiency may now be common among the poor billions on a low-meat diet. Disease transitions to non-communicable inflammatory disorders, but longer lives may be driven by positive meat transitions. Higher doses of nicotinamide lead to reduced regulatory T cells and immune intolerance. Loss of no longer needed symbiotic old friends compounds immunological overreactivity to cause allergic and autoimmune diseases. Inhibition of nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide consumers and loss of methyl groups or production of toxins may cause cancers, metabolic toxicity, or neurodegeneration. So meat is the key ingredient in this process. It's nicotinamide. NR. And of course, you can supplement with it. There's expensive products for this. Our friend, Dr. David Sinclair, he was at the last A4M event. He's a huge proponent, and he's been studying NAD supplementation through NR, nicotinamide riboside, in rats, and I think humans now. They're up to humans. It's important for cell development, repair, and integral to the process of aging. NAD is a master controller of much of the metabolism necessary for running large bodies and brains and restoring stem cells. Now, when patients say, I get all my protein from plant sources, they forget about NAD and nicotinamide riboside. Main sources of nicotinamide are animal products. Red meat gives a score of 100, chicken 70, fish 50, peanuts 100, obviously, oddly enough. Coffee 50, beans 10, barley 20, wheat 15, rice 10, potato 10, sorghum 10, soybean 10. So, these are approximate nicotinamide in foods, milligram per 100 gram. You're going to get very low quality, as Dr. Hellas asked earlier. Can you get it from a pea? Can you get it from a vegetable source? Yeah, maybe you can get some protein, but you're going to lack everything else. And if we're looking at NR and nicotinamide as a contributing factor towards chronic diseases, acute illnesses, and fatigue, then no, it is not the same. The calorie is not the same. Vegan low-consuming humans rely on gut symbionts to produce NAD and are at more risk for developing sequelae as a result of broad-spectrum antibiotic use. So I wonder if I have more of a slide on this one. Yeah, this one here. So tuberculosis was our friend and produced NAD in times of meat starvation. So those hindgut symbionts produce nicotinic acid that they share, as does tuberculosis. So there's one theory that the reason tuberculosis is so prevalent is because we evolved with it, and it was a symbiont that actually gave us energy in the form of NAD in times when we couldn't get access to meat. So if the host has moderately deficient NAD in the first place, they'll be less resilient to infections. This is a crazy theory that I read about. It makes some sense. So NAD is integral towards all parts of your body, your brain, your liver, your vasculature, your heart, lymphoid tissue. You fall apart if you don't have NAD. That's why patients might feel so great if you give them IV NAD or if you give them an NR. But if you just fix their diet, oftentimes they can feel better too. It goes on and on, like all the things that it's involved in here. Meat and nicotinamide, a causal role in human evolution. Chimpanzees went for high-quality diet, as did the early Homo. Homo sapiens, whose brains enlarged markedly simultaneously, managed high reproductive rates with large dependent children with long development periods and high longevity. Energy constraints were lifted to achieve this suite of costly traits without always having large trade-offs, at least when entity supply was allowed. So the theory was that the gorillas, the reason they're still in the trees is that their gut is, all the energy is dedicated towards digesting plant matter. And this is why their brain is low IQ, they're still in the trees, while other types of apes like us, we evolved to consume meats, and less of our energy resources goes towards then digesting them. So our gut is much smaller than the gorillas, right? More of our energy can go towards cognitive functions, like giving this lecture, rather than trying to digest a bunch of plant matter all day long, which is highly energy intensive, right? The cow has 3 stomachs and a huge body full of intestines to try to turn grass into energy, right? We're very different in that matter. Meat intake and the dose of vitamin B3. Insufficient meat as the root cause of acute and autoimmune illnesses. If nicotinamide supplies are low, this can lead to energy decline. Nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide is an important food signal to all organisms and is often mediated by serotonin, has defining effects on development, circadian rhythms, gene regulation through chromatin remodeling, and reproductive and other behavior. NADH as a cofactor performs more than 500 key dehydrogenase and other reactions. So we all learned in school that pellagra was something that pirates got. We shouldn't be seeing this in modern day. But there's a huge overlap between pellagra and aging. It's essentially, if you put it side by side, it's the same disease processes. Pellagra being a disease that was a problem of, the 17th century and prehistoric times. It shouldn't be an issue now, right? But we're seeing the same processes overlap. And it may be because people are eating less meat. They're eating more standard American diets, low NAD-rich diets, low nicotinamide-rich diets. We argue that a high risk of too little nicotinamide may be the most important difference between the diets in the past 10,000 years and those in the Paleolithic. So 10,000 years being when agriculture and farming and grains came into more prominent role than in Paleolithic, which is hunter-gatherer, which is a high meat culture. During that long time, as we co-evolved, much of our nutrigenome, microbiome, and meat culture variances were usually feasts or famines, or fatal, as meat then provided most of the calories, rather than chronic shortages over lifetimes. The first Neolithic agricultural revolution and the second Green Revolution 50 years ago may have, as an unintended consequence, reduced meat and micronutrients for those in poverty. Both revolutions increased cereal availability, reducing hunger, but not the hidden hunger of micronutrient deficiency. So that makes a lot of sense if we think about our population. They are full of calories, they're super obese, but they have all this chronic disease, they have all this fatigue, this lack of hormones, poor reproduction rates, brain fog, Alzheimer's, cardiac disease. This all overlaps, if we remember the slides previously, of where NAD plays a role in prevention. And then, pellagra, it's the same condition that we thought was extinct. So, of course, you can use NAD. Of course, you can inject it. You can infuse it. I prefer just eating red meat. You could do sublingual. There's now IV NR, which is much more pleasant than trying to put a patient on a 5-hour infusion of NAD drips, give them chest pain and so forth. Then we have NAD recyclers that we'll talk about. Methylene blue, MOTS-C, 5-amino-1-MQ. Again, IV NAD, we talked about that, kind of uncomfortable, expensive. NR is also kind of expensive, but much more pleasant if you're going to try to drip somebody on it. NAD recycling methylene blue. So NAD exists in 2 forms, NAD plus oxidized and NADH reduced. NAD plus is critical coenzyme in metabolism, accepting electrons during processes like glycolysis and the Krebs cycle, becoming NADH. For cells to keep producing energy, NADH must be oxidized back to NAD+, a process typically handled by mitochondrial electron transport chain, particularly at complex 1. When this system falters due to aging, disease, or hypoxia, NAD levels drop, stalling energy production and cellular function. Methylene blue acts as an artificial electron carrier, effectively recycling NAD plus from NADH outside of the usual electron transport chain pathway. It has a low redox potential, around 11 millivolts, allowing it to accept electrons from NADH, converting it to its reduced form, leucomethylene blue. Leucomethylene blue then donates these electrons directly to cytochrome C in complex 4 by bypassing complexes 1 and 3. This process regenerates NAD plus without relying on a fully functional electron transport chain, enhancing the NAD plus to NADH ratio. So this is essentially how methylene blue, it's a recycler of NAD. And so we'll use this in patients with acute illness where they're sick and they feel very fatigued. We've been using this in patients with the long COVID or the vaccine injury, and they need their mitochondria just doesn't work. We use it both as a therapeutic and a diagnostic. If it works, it works. If it doesn't work. And it tells you the fatigue is maybe coming from somewhere else. It's not through this process. This patient is a good illustration of this. She suffered in a water-damaged building for a very long time. The methylene blue helped, but moving out of the moldy building helped the most. She noticed that when she took the methylene blue, her brain fog lifted. She felt like she could finally clear. Her brain felt like it was clear for the first time in a long time. This is a patient who had a Herxing reaction when for a cystic abscess, and I put her on antibiotics and biocidin. The methylene blue seemed to help relieve the Herxheimer reaction. And then when she went off it, the symptoms came back. This patient is one of my most greatest cases for methylene blue. Was a demented combative Alzheimer's patient in a nursing home facility. And we gave her methylene blue at about 20 milligrams. And the patient's husband says he felt like his wife was coming back to him. And then the children, when they visited her, she wasn't like throwing things at them. She wasn't combative to the staff. One time she ran out of the methylene blue. The family was calling up my phone. They're blowing up my phone. And they're like, we need to get this stuff. Because without it, she was combative, Alzheimer's dementia. And then with it, she was less self-centered. She cared. She would wash herself, which was used for an Alzheimer's dementia patient. And it works a lot in cognition enhancement. Even outside of dementia, I've had business people, they like it as a cognitive enhancement, possibly through that enhancement in NAD. This is another one. It's a bit different mechanism. MOTS-C, I've recently started using this in chronically fatigued patients who I suspect of mitochondrial dysfunction. MOTS-C is a 16 amino acid peptide encoded within the mitochondrial genome. Unlike nuclear encoded proteins, it's a product of mitochondrial DNA, hinting at its deep tie to cellular energy regulation. One of its key effects is boosting NAD levels, though it does so indirectly compared to something like methylene blue. Research primarily from animal and cell studies show that MOTS-C activates AMPK, a master metabolic sensor. AMPK, when turned on, upregulates pathways that increase NAD biosynthesis, particularly via enzyme NAMPT, nicotinamide phosphoribosyltransferase, which recycles nicotinamide into NAD+ through the salvage pathway. In practical terms, this means MOTS-C doesn't donate electrons or act as a direct NAD precursor like NMN or NR. Instead, it signals cells to ramp up their own NAD production. Studies have shown that MOTS-C treatment in mice elevates NAD+ in skeletal muscle and other tissues, improving the NAD-NADH ratio. This shift enhances sirtuin activity, which relies on NAD to regulate mitochondrial function, DNA repair, and fat metabolism. These are processes tied to energy and aging. This is a patient I have with mitochondrial dysfunction and multiple stealth infections. He's lost hair, he's had crushing fatigue post-COVID. He had that classic post-exertional debilitating fatigue that would last weeks after trying to exercise. But this patient had responded to any mitochondrial therapy. I gave him an IV NAD infusion, and while it was extremely uncomfortable for him and he felt he had an elephant sitting on his chest, he felt great afterwards, and in the following weeks, he could even do a marathon without feeling that debilitating fatigue. I've put him on NR precursors, felt pretty good on those. I put him on 5-amino 1-MQ, which we're going to talk about in the next slide. He felt good on that. But the best he's found is on MOT-C. You do an injection of about 3 milligrams, and he feels good for at least about a week or two. He's also used thymosin alpha-1, which we'll talk about too. He uses that when he feels like the infections are taking him over again. And of course, I've treated him for these infections like the Candida issue, and he's gotten much better, less bloating in the gut. This is his lymphocyte map. You can see he had high activation. His body was carpet bombing itself, trying to fight off all these infections with high total T helper cells, high natural killer cells, cytotoxic T cells. He's really trying to fight off all these infections. And the thymosin alpha-1 has actually helped him feel a lot better. That lymphocyte map was actually on thymosin alpha-1, so that may have contributed to some of his elevation of natural killer cells, because that's what thymosin alpha-1 does. Why it might help with fatigue, immune modulation, anti-inflammatory effects, cellular energy support. We talked about thymosin alpha-1 previously in a lecture here. 5-amino-1 and Q. We have to talk about this one because I've been using this in the chronically fatigued, specifically long COVID patient. It works by inhibiting NMNT, a cytosolic enzyme found in tissues like fat and liver that regulates cellular metabolism. NMNT methylates nicotinamide, a form of B3, converting it to MNA, 1-methyl-nicotinamide, which is then excreted. This process reduces the pool of nicotinamide available for NAD synthesis through the salvage pathway. By blocking NNMT, 5-amino-1-MQ increases intracellular nicotinamide, boosting NAD production. Studies in adipocytes show it can raise NAD levels by 1.2 to 1.6 fold in a dose-dependent manner, with significant effects at higher concentrations. We typically will do about 25 or 50 milligrams 3 times a day, and patients do notice a difference if they have this problem with mitochondria. This elevation also increases SAM, a cofactor tied to methylation and energy regulation. NAD plus is vital for cellular energy, acting as a coenzyme in redox reaction. We've talked about this extensively. So the 5-amino-1-MQ is, I use it again as a therapeutic and a diagnostic for these patients who I suspect of mitochondrial dysregulation and poor NAD synthesis. I've had at least 3 cases where 5-amino-1-MQ was helpful. Actually, in 2 doctors that I know, some might be here in the chat with us. They can talk to us more about that maybe afterwards. Oftentimes they have lots of stealth infections, so their cellular energy trains are kind of sluggish because they're dealing with all these infections. Their NAD is depleted. Their NAD is sluggish. Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr, parvovirus, toxoplasma, streptococcus, mold. This is just in one patient here alone. A huge multi-stealth infection burden. So in conclusion of this lecture, you want to prioritize the ancestral diet, prioritize red meat for high NAD, creatine, aminos, carnitine, and more. Ignore the vegans. Mitochondrial disease is common, much more common than we would like to believe, since the standard American diet is common, and low NAD and sarcopenia is the norm. You see, go to Walmart. This is everywhere. Everyone looks fatigued, overweight, and fatty infiltrates with low muscle. We use mitochondrial therapies as both diagnostic and therapeutic. Since it's kind of difficult to diagnose, there's not really good lab testing for it. So if I suspect the patient, I've optimized them everywhere else. I've optimized anemia, thyroid, cortisol, testosterone, diet. They're still fatigued. Then you start using these mitochondrial therapies and you see if they get any better. And that's all I have for you guys today. Alasa, you have any questions for me?
Stefan, did you ever deal with growth hormone or growth hormone derivatives?
Growth hormone for fatigue? Yeah, that's a good one. I should add that to my slides, but that'll be on another lecture.
Okay.
Dr. Thierry Hertog, he's a huge fan of growth hormone. And I saw him doing his dog and pony show at one of the conferences where he was assessing a patient. The patient came up to him, he's an Indian doctor, and he told Dr. Hertog, "I'm so fatigued." And Dr. Hertog, he said, "Well, what's your diet?" He said, "It's vegan." And he says, "Oh, you will be a lifelong fatigue."
Yeah. Well, Dr. Herzog's got a few ideas that are out there. We'll just leave it at that. So,
Yeah, I like his assessment there, the lifelong fatigue vegan.
yeah. I know. So, okay. Can you do a brief summary of your mitochondrial regenerators?
Yeah, so first is the diet. They need to get off the standard American diet. They need to prioritize high NAD food sources, like the red meats that we discussed. They need to improve the omega-3 to 6 balance. They need to get rid of the seed oils, and they need to improve omega-3 ratio by consuming proper food sources. And then the mitochondrial therapies that I like, you can do sub-Q NAD injections every 3 days, about 100 milligrams. You can do IV infusions of NAD or NR precursors. You can take NR as a precursor. I like the oral version or the sublingual liposomal version. And then you can do the peptide MOTS-C injection, 3 milligrams every 3 days. The patients will tell you if it's working or not. So they'll say, oh, I felt it was wearing off by day 3. So you can inject it again day 3. Then you can do 5-amino 1-MQ, 25 to 50 milligrams 3 times a day. And it either works or it doesn't. Like, it's night and day. The patients will either say a light turned on and they felt great, or they're like, what'd you give me, a placebo? That's what they'll tell you.
The 5-amino 1-MQ is fairly expensive, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little expensive, but when it works for fatigue, the patient's asked to reorder it.
Okay. All right. Very good. And where does methylene blue fit in that?
Yeah, the
That's
methylene blue, it works. It's not as potent as some of the other therapies, but some people really like it. It kind of turns on a little light, and they feel a little bit more cognitive enhancement, a little clearer. Yeah.
Okay. We had a lecture on our side about MitoQ. I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
Is it a supplement?
Yeah.
I never heard of it. What's the active ingredient?
I was hoping you'd remember.
It's probably, I should have talked about CoQ10, where a lot of those supplements will have CoQ10, which is also, I should have mentioned, a lot, very important for coenzyme reactions, like 500 different coenzyme reactions and mitochondrial energy. And it's, again, CoQ10 is found in animal source foods too. It's specifically very high in beef heart, of all things.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to find it here. So, vitamin D. Yeah, MitoQ and well, yeah. So it's L-carnitine and quinones, and so yeah. So that's coenzyme Q10 and some magnesium.
Does it have urolithin A in it by any chance?
No,
For mitochondria? Okay.
not in this one. So, okay. It's my 2 cents anyway.
Someone says liver tastes terrible. Let me get you my recipe. I'll put it in the chat.
Stefan, it was a very good lecture, but however, being a vegetarian, I think you can live being a vegetarian and having a good muscular activity. I mean, there are very many sports players and the young kids, they're on vegetarian diet. So, in vegetarian diet, in certain religion is a part of that. So, patient comes to your office and you tell them that, well, you have to eat meat. It just doesn't work. So I just want you to be aware of the fact that they are from birth, they're born, and they are vegetarian, and they are going to remain vegetarian. So it's like you're Christian, you live with your Bible, and until you die, you have your Bible.
Yeah.
Like the part of the protein, you get it from beef or whatever other meat you get. Hunter-gatherers, yes, they were working very hard, and that was available to them compared to the other diet. So I think we have to somewhere and be in the middle of the road and find the solution. I think that's not the only solution.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of supplementation that can be done. As you say, creatine, taurine, B12 injections, NAD precursors, NAD infusions, it can creatine. The list goes on, and I mean, it's
Yes, but I think that the part we are missing is the yoga breathing, relaxation, and deep breathing exercises, if you don't have enough oxygen, no matter what you do, it's not going to work. So I think that that part has to be, for ATP production, you have to have oxygen. Without oxygen, you're not going to produce ATP. And your peripheral perfusion has to be better. Your muscular activity has to be there. So I think we have to emphasize those. Otherwise, you can keep on giving whatever you want to give, but if you don't oxygenate the tissue, you're not going to have the response.
Well, yeah, that's why the exercise is so important. They need to move. They need to
Yeah,
grow.
but when they are fatigued and they don't have energy, they are not going to be able to do exercise.
True. The first
So,
comes the
so
diet and the
physical,
NAD.
right, but they can do the breathing exercise. And breathing exercise are equally important if it is done properly. And I don't think it's been given enough importance how to do the all different type of deep breathing with the involvement of the diaphragm in the diaphragmatic breathing and changing your hypersympathetic dominance to the parasympathetic system. And I think that these are the important factors that when everyone is discussing about all different aspects, that not enough importance is being paid to that. And so, yes, it was a very good lecture. You gave a lot of good tips to those who didn't know and put it together. But I think that there are other avenues, and you may say that you have to do NAD. No, if you do enough oxygenation of the tissue, if NAD is deficient, of course you have to do it, but that comes a little bit later in the cycle, just like you showed it. The first you do this, then you do that, then you do that. So I think oxygenation comes in early part because many of those who have a mitochondrial dysfunction and problem, yes, they have a problem with the electron transport chain. They may have a problem with everything what you have described, um, and the problem with the availability of oxygen. So the microcirculation is a very important part when you are dealing with anyone with the chronic fatigue and mitochondrial dysfunction, because mitochondrial dysfunction just doesn't come like that. It is the sequential, unless somebody is poisoned. Yes, in many chemically sensitive patients, but we in them we see that they have when we do the heart rate variability test, right away we see that they have a sympathetic dominance and parasympathetic negative activity. And if you see that, then you know that that microcirculation cannot be normal. And then you try to look for that. And if you look at the blood gases, venous blood gases, you will see that they have a very high amount of PvO2. And when they have a high amount of PvO2, immediately you know microcirculation is shut off and there is communication between the venous and the arterial blood together. So the oxygen from the arterial blood going to the capillaries not being utilized by peripheral tissue, it bypasses and immediately goes in the venous blood. So immediately you know that tissue oxygenation is not there. If tissue oxygenation is not there, then tissue nutrients are not there because they don't have a time because, you can throw a lot of amount of oxygenated blood and the venous. But if the microcirculation is not good, you're not going to have extraction of, and the waste products are not being excreted properly, and the whole balance is off. So I think that it was very good, and whatever I have suggested is to be addressed when you're evaluating the patient.
Yes. We need a
Dr. Patel, you're talking a lot about lifestyle type of things, which I think goes along with that. And as you know, detoxification, proper eating, The one thing that
It
I'll
is
point
not
out,
just the lifestyle. And when you are evaluating the patient, because the lifestyle, when what I say is the breathing is not lifestyle, it is the part of the treatment.
no, exactly.
Okay.
But if you incorporate that into your lifestyle, like you do a morning Wim
Sure.
Hof breathing or something like that, it becomes part of your
Yeah,
lifestyle,
but
and
lot
that's
of
what you need to
patients,
change.
lots of patients don't know how to do the right breathing.
Of course not. No one teaches them.
And they don't know even how to sit correctly.
No, yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
right.
if they don't sit correctly, they don't breathe correctly.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, they don't sleep right either.
So, but I just wanted to bring out that the oxygenation, microcirculation, and you can uh, do it a lot by doing many other things besides the correct way of diet, not drinking water with the food, and so many other things besides to have the proper digestion. Because you can have acidity, but if you're going to drink water before or right after, your acidity goes. And your digestion, your muscle fiber is not going to be digested properly. And when you do the stool analysis, they are full of fibers. So you know that they may be on a right diet, but not being digested properly, and that does not being assimilated properly. That will be another lecture for Stefan.
Okay.
So it was very good. Whatever you had to contribute was very good. Thank you. So what is your recommendation that you said no seed oil? That is the recent slogan, no seed oil. But the people are having avocado oil, but avocado oil, when they eat it, it's no good. When
It's okay.
so I think that omega-6,
Avocado.
omega-3, they all
Um,
are proper, but as soon as you heat, many oils are not stable and they oxidize easily than the other oils that have a high omega-6.
right. So some have less omega-6 than others, right? Avocado oil isn't the worst offender. It's not by far. Coconut oil isn't bad either. Um, it's some of the other ones. The tinier nuts seem to be worse. The smaller the nut, the worse.
Yeah.
The seed, I should say,
And
not
you have
nut,
to see
seed.
that. You have to see that which nuts get spoiled easily. And these are the nuts you must avoid as a oil,
Yeah.
because they don't have a good amount of shelf life, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Even olive oil, I mean,
Yeah.
cooking with that also causes a tremendous amount of oxidation. I think ghee is much better.
Right, and peanut oil, although it just shows that it has a high omega-6, but it is still, when you warm it, it doesn't get oxidized that easily. And whatever he has showed, I mean, yes, that is, but in a daily life, I can just say that is that may be, I don't know, I cannot say that anybody has done any study for oxidation, but when you eat, if oil is oxidized immediately, you know that whatever you have cooked just smells rancid and tastes rancid.
Yeah.
Before it even smells rancid,
Yeah.
it tastes rancid.
Tastes
So
bad. You could smell it.
yeah, so I think that we are very close to it, but not we are nearly to it. And there are certain traditions which comes generations together. We should not, within the light of recent development, we should not completely ignore that, because that it becomes that ghee was not in a vogue for a long time when vegetable ghee came around, and then gradually people started to understand that why ghee was better than all the other items. Even when you warm it at a low temperature, ghee has a much stability compared to the other oils, although ghee is not a seed oil, so that's true. Um, but there are some other oils that, just like olive oil, if you do it at a low temperature, it's okay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have a shelf life.
The polyphenols, and I learned this when I went to Italy. I went to olive groves. I learned that the very huge difference in olives over there. So when you harvest the olive earlier in October, it is not ripe. It's green on the vine. This is a super high polyphenol concentration. The polyphenols are actually very good for you. They're very protective against cardiovascular disease. But the problem with this is that it's hard to extract the oil from this. And so the price of the olive oil will be much higher. And so when you taste it, it's going to be super spicy. And then you know this is a high polyphenol, early harvested olive oil. Now compare this to the ones that's harvested later in November. This one has more of a bland taste, so they'll use that one for cooking because it's not such a high quality. The earlier harvested one, they put this on the pizza, they put this on the salads because it has a higher taste and a higher quality. So even the type when you harvest it matters for its nutrient quality and benefits.
You're right. And I think a highlight about what sometimes they say virgin oil, then they say extra virgin olive oil, and there are like two or three different kinds. And I did some research on it, and and saying that it is extra virgin oil doesn't mean that it's going to be extra good for you.
Right. You know if it's very spicy, and you know if they harvest it and the date. The longer the date is from the harvest, the polyphenol concentration goes down and the less strong it is. When you taste a really strong olive oil, you're like, whoa, this stuff is strong. You know it's high polyphenol. You'll know when you taste it. Good.
Do you think that have you read anything about why certain cultures are using olive oil with their carbohydrate intake, like Italians, they dip their bread, and also Greek, they dip their bread in the olive oil, and the green color olive oil is probably little better than having no color to it, and there must be the rate of absorption and many more things.
Well, I've
It
looked
has
into
kept the tradition.
it is the tradition. I think the high polyphenols, it's somehow it must mitigate oxidation. But then what I know for certain is when you actually consume high polyphenols with steak, it actually works as an iron chelator. So it inhibits a lot of the high iron that you might get if you eat a lot of red steaks and so forth. So you can do like a high polyphenol green tea or black tea, or you can have high polyphenol olive oil, and it acts as a bit of an iron chelator. This can be good for people if they have high iron and iron overload. I think the high polyphenols, it works as a bit of a buffer for oxidation when you're eating, oxidized food.
But it may be also eating the olive oil dipped bread that may have a different uh, problem with the carbohydrate being developing the insulin resistance, because they eat lot of bread, and I mean, unless they are old and after 50 in a weight gain is a different story, but you don't see as many young ones
That's true.
having too much weight. And I think partly that attributes to that. Um, and after 50, all the weight gain is not related to food alone. It is a lot of endocrine, like what you pointed out. But and sarcopenia is also not part of just the protein deficiency, but there are multiple different things are involved. And somebody already pointed out about growth hormone. But yes, and 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 the other hormone
I,
effects on
I think
building.
there's definitely something to that. Every time I go to Italy, I notice just how skinnier the population is, and they're not super overweight like they are here. It probably has to do with exactly as you're saying. It's the olive oil. It's the improving their omega-3 to 6 ratio. I don't think they're inundated with just as much omega-6 seed oils that we are here in the U.S. I know they do eat some fried foods. I know I've seen them eat McDonald's like the Italian kids, but I don't know if they're doing it like to the extent that we do it here, and it's just we're not as inundated with it as they are there.
And then another thing, what I observed in Brazil and Argentina, they eat so much meat, so much meat. I mean, usually when you go to the restaurant, for vegetarian it becomes it's a nightmare because there is not anything to eat for them except you have to order the basket of bread if you want to have it. So and they eat so much meat, and I have not seen too many fat people walking around the mall or anything. So there is a great truth in what you are saying. But I mean, young people, burn up fat, but the older they get, they are fat. They are no different than other culture.
Nah, but at least younger, they're not as
Yeah,
fat.
right, exactly.
Very good, guys. Is that all for tonight? Any other questions? Oh, okay. Harshfield, you got anything? Joseph, you got anything?
Steph, have you noticed that I think McDonald's started using these vegetable oils to do the French fries? I don't know. I don't eat much of it, but they used to have great French fries around the 70s, I think, and the French fries were just kind of bland. Steak and Shake, so as advertising, we're going back to using tallow to,
Yeah, I've heard about that.
and so I thought, I think that's how my grandmother cooked, really. I hadn't paid much attention to it. Do you know what's your take on using like tallow? We just talked about ghee a second ago, a more
Yes.
uh, oil like that to fry things in.
So here's the thing. Everybody's excited about Steak and Shake, but I've fried tallow fries before. I've made them before. It's one use, and then you got to throw it out because the fat is oxidized when you fry it. The Steak and Shake's never going to change that oil. And what they also do is they bleach it so that it has no taste. Because when you have a natural tallow, it has a bit of a, I don't know, a tallow cow type of taste. And I know they bleach it and they extract all the nutrients from it so that it's just an oil, and then they're going to reuse it again and again and again. So it's just not far off from what they have now.
Oh man, I was going to go do it. Okay, thank you, Steph. You saved me, buddy. Hey, that's a great talk, man. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it would just be too expensive for Steak and Shake to get a new tallow every time they fried it. They're not going to do that. You'd have to do it at home, though. You could do that, then you got to throw it out.
I have a question for Stefan. Okay.
Yes, sure.
When you have really good fresh bread or, something that's, a elegant type of bread, and we have it with olive oil and balsamic vinegar.
Tasty.
Balsamic vinegar is heavenly. But of course, in moderation, right?
Well, it's classic Italian to mix olive oil and balsamic vinegar for dipping the bread. It's very
But
well known.
you get a good European pumpernickel bread or a good rye bread,
Yeah.
like a real German, pumpernickel. It's great stuff.
Yes, you get an ancient grain and fermenting it. My wife makes a very good sourdough bread, and when you ferment sourdough bread, it decreases the gluten concentration by a lot, and so you actually tolerate it a lot better than would you say another type of bread that is higher gluten concentration. Much better tolerated for patients with sensitivity.
So we need the recipe.
Oh yes, I have that too. I put my link there to my blog. You follow it and you look at my blog, you'll learn a bunch of recipes, including the beef liver pate.
Right. So, what I remember in the Hauptbahnhof in München, you get a Dunkelbier and a lox sandwich,
Yes,
and that's good stuff.
sure is.
So,
I have a question. What do you think of the blood type diet or anything relation to blood type? Like, do you think that has any weight
Um,
on decision making? Because I mean, I've experimented a lot with fasting, and I have
yeah,
O positive blood, so I know that some people can tolerate things differently. I feel like when I've done fasting, I've given up things for a while, and my body, if you go, like I did a yoga teacher training program and I lived in a tent for a month and I ate vegan food and did a lot of breath work and a lot of yoga and didn't have any cell phones. I was like very, it's a complete transformation of an experience. And my
Wow.
energy was raised pretty high because my sensitivity, I was walking barefoot. So, talk about grounding, and was in the Bahamas. So, but when I ate fish for the first time, it felt really normal, like my body wanted it. I could actually really tell how my body felt every time I reintroduced a different type of food. And then when I ate chicken, it wasn't of the same quality. The fish was like from the island. The chicken was once I got back to the US, and that didn't taste very good. It was like I tasted animal. It was like a very interesting experiment. Like I've done these things for myself, but I know that I mean, because O positive blood's O blood, I definitely know I need to eat more protein. I've always been told that, even if I've done Ayurvedic stuff and
Hmm.
you know. So I was just curious of what you thought with diet and blood type.
I don't hold too much weight to that. Just, as we discussed in this lecture, the evolution, we all came from our Paleolithic ancestors where we really subsisted off of game. We hunted game, and there wasn't a lot of grain. The agriculture revolution really happened about 10,000 years ago, and the grain came into being, and all these various diets were for civilizations, for keeping a civilization going. How do you keep a bunch of Romans happy? Well, you give them bread. And so this grain-based diet developed over time, but we all evolved from our Paleolithic times. And before that, we were apes in the trees. And the reason there's still some apes in the trees, and we're here talking to each other on Zoom, is because we developed brains, and we don't want to devote tons of energy and resources towards digesting plant matter all day long, right? It takes too much energy to have so much gut fermentation process to turn plant into energy. So we all came, the reason we're here is from an animal-based diet to varying degrees. Maybe other cultures 10,000 years ago, they diverted more towards plant and grain-based diets. And then maybe Northern European cultures, more difficult to grow a lot of plants all year round. So most likely Northern Europeans ate a lot more meats and fermented foods and canned foods and salted foods to get them through the winters. But maybe more Indo and Malaysian cultures, they had the opportunity to eat a lot more plants all year round, coconuts, fruits, and so forth. I'm sure they ate a lot of fish. I mean, fish was probably always a part of their diet due to being on the Indian Ocean and so forth. But yeah, that's my idea on it, an evolutionary perspective. Cool. All
So
right, guys.
I can contribute to that the blood type diet because I did it for several years along with the Atkins kind of alongside of it. And then I got the privilege of having an IgG test. And interestingly, most the nuts and the grains, which are kind of a no-no for an O type, are also a no-no on the IgG test. So I'm sensitive to all that same stuff that I was told not to eat. But the other part of some of the other things like cheeses and what have you, they were fine. A lot of things were fine on the IgG test, but the nuts and the grains were not. But I suspect that's because of the high glyphosates and what have you that's involved in all of those foods, the nuts and the grains. So maybe not so much the nuts, but definitely the grains.
Yeah.
That's my take.
The quality matters, even among the animal source foods. Like you mentioned the chicken, and I remember the fat chicken earlier. If the chicken is fed soybean oil and so forth, they'll have high omega-6. Their eggs will be super high omega-6, lower omega-3s. So it matters what you feed the chicken because, we raise chickens in our backyard. We realize how much these things eat and how expensive it is to get them really high quality feed. It's very expensive. And I know a lot of these poultry out there, they're not fed super high quality, and so their eggs are going to be high omega-6. And most chickens are high omega-6 meat profile anyway, just from the oils that they're fed that fattens them up, and the seeds that they're fed that fattens them up, the corn, and the soy. I prefer ruminant animals that have they're not monogastric, so they have more than one stomach, like the cow. They could process things out a little bit better, especially if they're regeneratively raised, they're on grass. Their meat profile is going to be a lot better than a lot of the monogastric animals like pigs. I know Dr. Halassa doesn't eat pigs for other reasons, but I don't eat pigs either unless they're from a really high quality farm and I know they're fed right. Yeah.
I
Stefan,
feel I feel the same way, but do you know, like we eat a lot of chicken because my daughter likes chicken, and she has cysts in her ovaries, and it definitely has to do with I mean, we're getting her blood type, I mean, her blood work back, but she definitely has hormone imbalance, and she's 16. And I was just curious if you knew any good resources for chicken that would be, it's like that Bell's chicken that's popular. They've been around forever. What would
No,
I mean, you would like
no, you need to know the
just
farmer.
need
Yes.
to know the farmer.
Yeah.
Yes. I can hardly eat a chicken anymore. And I love chicken, but I used to love it.
Let me add something. Let me add something here very important because I know when I miss it, especially with a chicken thing. Estrogen dominant syndrome is actually the reason why all this obesity. Beside the diet, there's also endocrine disruptors and hormonal imbalance. And estrogen dominant syndrome, with all the food that we are eating, with all this endocrine disruptors, leading to cortisol dominant syndrome, which leads to metabolic syndrome. And I think that's part of the obesity. So it's not just the quality of the nutrition. We also need to look at those endocrine disruptors as the reason of
Dr.
that. So
Palasa,
sorry for interrupting.
they also feed chicken arsenic to make them fat.
What?
Well,
Arsenic containing food. Okay. Number two is the antibiotics. And so these are very common contaminants for chicken. So like antibiotic sensitive patients may not be able to chicken, although not being sensitive to chicken, they are not able to. And those who are on chicken diet and they are not on organic chicken, they don't know their farmer, they should also question about arsenic. Rice dominant diet have also high levels of arsenic. So, and arsenic is a very in a ongoing high level is a carcinogenic. So one has to pay good attention to that. But you cannot feed. Um, you have to remain free of all fish and shellfish if you're going to do the urine test for arsenic.
The arsenic basically, as Dr. Patel mentioned, if the chickens are eating feed, a lot of times the feed is stored in silos and they pump arsenic gas into the silos to kill the mold. The arsenic gets into the feed, the chicken eats the feed, we eat the chicken.
What? Oh, that's terrible.
they also lie a lot about chickens. I have a guy that
They're
works.
not really chicken.
No, they lie about what they feed it and stuff and how they raise it. They'll say, pasture raised, and that means that they have maybe 2 more inches of space inside their inside pasture. It's not really.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Exactly. It really is all about the feed, what they eat.
And the feed, he was shoveling stuff into the Purdue. He was a trucker, so he would bring these truckloads of stuff that Purdue absolutely said that was not in their chickens, and that he was delivering that stuff to them by the truckloads. So that obviously they were lying. So I don't know what you do about that. Just avoid chickens because
Yeah, you gotta raise them yourself, which we do, or know a farmer.
Well, I think the icing on the cake is I once heard in feedlots they put chicken droppings in the feed for cattle.
Ooh,
Yep.
That's nasty.
Yeah, Lou is right.
Yep. There's a lot of that. It's pretty bad.
And one time I went down to South America and the chickens, they sit in the trees and they eat bugs and people, they throw them corn. And that's a natural chicken. I mean, you don't know what kind of insects they eat, but that's part of their diet.
It's a real diet.
All right, guys, I'm signing off. Good night.